As we look at the past, I would hope we can get inspired by looking at the craftsmanship and looking at the details and long to build better because we see beautiful things like this. We're going to study my hero, William Buckland, but you need to understand that in America, okay, the builders were influential. It was thought that there was these gentry that ordered the books and had the books and figured out how things should be built, and the builders were just kind of following orders. It actually is my research is that these guys actually were, you know, leading the effort on design and everything else, and William Buckland's a good example. Now, his story is that Buckland was trained as a carpenter, an apprentice in England, okay, and actually in London. So, excuse me. That was a big deal because he would have been trained by the best. His uncle was actually a joiner. Now, a joiner is someone who joins boards together. So, a joiner would be basically a trim carpenter today. He might be making cabinets. He might be doing stuff. If you ever heard the saying that he's a joiner, it's more trim carpenter than a framer, okay? That's who he traveled, that's who he would have studied under. That's who he would have apprenticed under. He became an indentured servant. So Thomas Mason, his dad, George Mason, was building a house in Virginia, and they needed someone to come finish it out. And so he says to Thomas, hey, will you find me someone that would come work for us? And he creates an indentured servant clause, okay? An indentured servant, don't think of chains and being a servant that way. Indentured servant is basically a contract where guys basically said, I'll come work for you for 4 years. You're going to pay me this much money. In return, you're going to bring me over from England to America. His indentured servant contract with Mason was pretty good. He was paid about 20 pounds a year, which isn't a ton of money, but considering that sometimes these indentures, all they had was room and board. The fact that he was paid a fee on top of it was something. He comes to Gunston Hall and begins to finish it out. It's thought that the masonry and the walls were already built at this point. And so he begins and starts his business in Virginia, working for George Mason, and then he moves to Annapolis after that. Now, this is Gunston Hall, okay? This is about 1740s, 1750s. This is the interior side of it. I mean, the elevation and the details here are really rich, really nice. You look in the dining room, right? Incredible carvings and incredible details. Now, Buckland was a carver, okay? So it's thought he's carved some of these things, but carving wasn't such a rare commodity that no one did it. So it's thought he had a carver or two on his staff. But he would have organized these people. He would have laid all this work out. He would have used these latest pattern books and design books to come up with these designs and these styles and then executed it. In the sitting room, there's this chinoiserie, right? This Chinese influence of the design and things like that. So think about this is in Virginia in the 1750s. Talk about calling your neighbors and coming over to look at my house, right? He is, Buckland is blowing it out of the park, right? He is showing people how buildings should look. And he ends up building quite a business and quite a reputation in the area and stays very busy. It's sad because Buckland dies when he's 40. He moves to Annapolis when he's 34, so he's about 6 years in Annapolis. But he comes over when he's 20, so he's in Virginia about 14, 15 years. And then he moves to Annapolis and then he dies. When he dies, he has a library of 14 building books, okay? Now, in this period, not a lot of people read, right? Not a lot of people were illiterate. It's interesting, I've got a note from one of my researches, 1740, okay? The London Tradesman, this is 1747, is talking about builders. And the carpenters employed in the wooden work from the foundation to the top. He ought to have solid judgment in the matters of this kind, in other words, in building. He requires a strong, robust body and a hale constitution. Not sure what that means, but He must read English, write a tolerable hand, and know how to design his work, okay? So this gives us a hint about what these guys knew, right? That they were not illiterate, they weren't knuckleheads, they actually knew how to design, they knew how to read, and they were reading these design books, these pattern books like that, to come up with and execute designs like this. This is his house in Annapolis. It's called the Hammond Hardwood House. It's very famous. It's thought to be inspired by this Villa Pacini, which is a Palladian house. You can see that inspiration does not mean an exact copy, right? He wanted to do these octagonal fronts here. That's not seen here. Obviously, they built a kind of an attic level over there that isn't executed. The pilasters on the front, some of the other things. You don't know whether those things are driven by the customer, hey, I don't really want to go that crazy, or whether it's just, no, I'm inspired by that, but I actually want to see it executed this way. This is considered his, magnum opus. It's a fabulous house. If you haven't seen it, you can still go through it. This doorway, Jefferson said when he toured through here in the early 1800s, he said this is the most beautiful doorway in all of America, right? So it was copied from an Abraham Swan book. This was the inspiration. You can see that Buckland actually did an arch top and added much more carving. So typically they're dressed down. Actually, Buckland kind of dresses things up. There are sketches of Jefferson trying to draw this entry and trying to look at it saying, this is awesome, and trying to sketch it out. And in the federal period, we're going to talk a lot about Jefferson because he was kind of a nightmare homeowner if you want to do it. He knew enough to be dangerous, and he fiddled and played, and anyway, we'll get into Jefferson. But Jefferson loved this entry and was completely inspired by it. But you see the execution of this work, and zooming in on the pediment at the top, the cartouche and this carving in the window. It's pretty fabulous, right? It's pretty amazing. You understand why he's one of my heroes.